Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Desk University, your destination for all things computational design and AEC technology. We're really excited to have you with us today for this very special episode celebrating International Women's Day. We wanted to say a huge welcome to all of you, our computational designers and AEC innovators. Today, you'll be learning about how to apply your computational design skills to management tasks, creating better Dynamo Player experiences with inputs and outputs, and also how to optimize your VR experiences. I'm Lisa Marie. I'm a project manager and BIM manager at Dolan, and I host a technical blog, lm2.me, where I document my journey, how I'm learning to code for Revit and Dynamo. Before we start, I did also just want to point out some of the exciting sessions we have coming up. So our session next week is actually on robotics. So that's March 17th. I know I'm really looking forward to it, and I really hope to see you there. You know, you can also always look to our website for upcoming sessions, some of which haven't been announced yet, so keep an eye on that. And I also just wanted to give a quick shout out to the entire Your Desk team. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and of course, we wouldn't be able to do it without that group, so we're really grateful for that. For today's session, I would like to introduce our three guests for today. So joining me are Mercedes, Caris, and Dana. Mercedes is a Uruguayan-born technology lover and a licensed architect. She has international experience working and living in the US and France as well. She has studied digital fabrication and coding and just has a passion for improving machines and processes. She co-founded Archsourcing 5 years ago and runs this tech company that helps US firms thrive with BIM. When she's not working, you can find her having fun with techie art and skating. So welcome, we're really happy to have you join us.
Thank you, I'm excited to be here.
Dana is an associate and BIM technologist at Smithgroup. Sorry, I'm messing up all the names today. At Smithgroup. She works to develop solutions for interdisciplinary teams, and she also frequently shares her experience in Dynamo and coding at conferences and other AEC events. Recently, she actually worked on a series with Asan to teach us all Python, and that was featured on Your Desk, and there's actually another episode in that series that you can check out on her new YouTube channel, Dynamo BIM, which I absolutely love the name of. So we're really happy to welcome you back. Thanks for being here with us. And Caris is a technical artist for virtual reality who enjoys working with real-time game engines. For the past 3 years, she's been developing virtual reality applications using Unity and C# at Walter P. Moore. She also is an experienced presenter sharing her insights at various conferences, and we are very excited to have you here with us today to share those insights with us.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. And just as a quick overview, so today will be a little bit of a lightning round of these three presentations, and we will save the Q&A session for the end of, but please keep your questions coming in the chat as after a speaker is done presenting, we'll be monitoring the chat and try to also add information there, and then we'll circle back with everybody at the end. And as you're listening, if there's a new piece of information you learned or something interesting, go ahead and click that like button so that other people can find our videos as well. And with that, I will pass it on to Mercedes for her presentation on computational design for management.
Yay. Super. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Let's get started. So hi, everybody. I'm going to go super fast and dive into easy tech implementations within a team. So this is going to be around architecture because many of our clients are architecture firms. We do have construction firms as well, but it can definitely be extrapolated to other realms. So my promise to you is that at the end of this 15-minute, hopefully talk, I will have shared as much as practical information and thoughts as I can squeeze into it. And hopefully some of these ideas will make a difference or at least raise questions about how to approach tech with your team and how to implement it. So before diving right into it, I'm going and to say this is for everybody. So tech inclined souls, very tech inclined souls, not that inclined tech souls and anti-tech souls as well, because we're on the same journey in the AEC industry. So this is for everyone, and there's no coding experience needed. Just wanna take a dive into it. So I'll revolve around the idea of getting different chunks of the process together, because I believe that's the only way to ensure that there's one common and unique source of information. So that's what we basically do with BIM. You expect the model to have everything and keep it consistently through all the development and even to construction. And that's the only way to get an organized flow of information. So to me, that's essential, like looking at tiny problems, but also looking at the overview of the whole thing and how it works. And ultimately, how to make a connection between those parts. So just because of the very same nature of what we do at Archsourcing, I have this approach. So as Lisa Marie mentioned, we're a BIM consultancy and make BIM happen for architecture firms. And in both cases, whether if it's a BIM consultancy itself for production support within a project, every client has its own BIM standards, naming conventions, firm standards. They need to be compliant with that. They need to be compatible, and interoperability is it's a big issue among the firm as well. So every new client that we get on board is a new layer of BIM standards and naming conventions and stuff. You know how it works. Like everybody really loves standards. So everybody has their own standards. We have our own standards as well. So it's a bunch of layers of standards underlaying. So we became pretty good at observing and train and observing like how things work for a very similar objective in different firms and we kind of try to put all together and organize that for the most of everything. So I like to see this as a sample space of, as a small sample space of how the industry is shifting and how we can observe that shift and just improve the process. So here's an observation. This is a typical structure from a team. So you get a BIM manager, and then the ratio is about 120, sometimes more, 120 at the best. And that BIM manager is not necessarily a BIM manager per se. It can be a computational designer, it can be tech-oriented, or just somebody that knows or understands about text or know how to code, etc. That variable can iterate, but note so note I only did eyes, and if I had to include one mouth or one smile or sad face, I would definitely do this. And this is the happier you can get within the spectrum of well, I think you don't, because we shouldn't do such thing. That's precisely what's holding back the entire industry, and why we need to keep moving forward. And let me pull a couple of strings here. You don't have to know how to code to understand the power of it, and you don't have to be a machine learning specialist or engineer to understand what's just the basic logic behind it, and understand that there's no machine learning embedded, let's say, in Revit. So it's incredibly important to bring the complete gang to the tech tables, and solutions come, incredible ones. Solutions come from hands-on people, and sometimes those are not tech-oriented, but they do have the solution. So there's always this dichotomy between the person that really knows how to do stuff But maybe that idea or that solution doesn't come from that very same person. It needs to come from somebody else. So that's the importance of bringing everybody together and keep the conversation going between the two realms. So our wikis are a step in that direction. So these are Notion wikis. This one's the BIM one, the workflow one. The intent here is to set a baseline, a guide. This is kind of our PEP 8. There's so many things we can learn from other industries and that we can replicate to improve ours. That has always fascinated me. So again, only people who understand the power and the limitations can come up with ideas. So this creates a baseline and shifts from nice to have to must have, and at least must understand. I don't expect everybody to be coder, but I think it's important to understand the power of it. So this is eventually happen, and if you ask me, the faster the better. This is kind of a joke, but if you ask me where do I draw the line in the sand, I guess it's like you need to laugh at the memes. There's a lot of those. So you gotta at least start to understand like what's going on and what are we laughing at and what's not funny at all. So, but again, and going back to the wiki, if you want to take a deeper that, you don't have to go somewhere else. You don't like get interested people in technology, go to somewhere else. You just go there. So here we have like a deeper section, and so we have our hot desk. So our hot desk is an internal blog to get live help and provide help, and it's currently private to us, but you never know. And there were two challenges here. So at the beginning, when I started thinking about a learning management system and with AI and all complex stuff, I just went right through IBM and Watson, and that was a super complex solution for a very tiny and basic problem. And we ended up in Discord, so it was super naive to think that I needed high tech for that. So this, if you use McNeil products, so this is what they have for Rhino and Grasshopper and stuff. So this creates a universe that bridges like different kinds of people, where people can get help and provide help, and it eases your way when everybody's looking for it. So challenge number 2 here was getting people to use the hot desk, because of course, like the story seems pretty nice, so but how do you get people to use it? So again, this is about connecting the different parts of the process. And when there's tech, I believe there's three important things. So one is certainly useful, like completely and concrete, useful to whatever you're trying to do or to achieve. And then there's use, of course, and then there's handy. There's always a tipping point. For example, in this one, when it took us a year to get enough information for people to start using it. And then there's this little help, like integration with Slack. So we use Slack for internal communication. I know this can be done with Discord as well. So every time somebody posts this on the hot desk, there's a pop-up in Slack saying like, hey, this is, and like, even if people don't read it, at least you know that happened to somebody else. And then at least you keep up to date with what's going on and what are the problems we're having and how we can solve them out, or what was the take on that. And then again, like we're a very collaborative company, but collaboration doesn't mean interruption. So this is not like you get a post every time that somebody posted, but like there's a tech team, and so tech team gets all the single posts about Dynamo, about scripting, about coding, about Revit, about the whole package. And then some other users which are not coding client only get, let's say, Revit posts or that kind of stuff. So it's really about connecting what needs to be connected and keep everybody up to speed on that. You can always check dashboards. Those are always fancy. So my experience with this is like what was really interesting in this one is about trending search items. Sometimes weird words pop up like shoes. Somebody's looking for shoes on the on the hot desk. But then it gives you a sense of what are the things we're having more trouble with, or what it would be good to address, or or that kind of stuff. So that's good. And in general, with dashboards, my experience at least, it takes so much time to get the proper information. It's such a hard job to get the exact information you need and the exact information you need to a proper evaluation. I feel it's a little bit like machine learning, like getting together your data set can take even more than crafting the algorithm itself. And here's an example of that. I am very drawn by processes, and it always called my attention. Like Revit has a wide power with many disciplines, different user, different stages of the project. But if you just grab a little chunk of a project, then tools you use are just 5, 10. At a certain, I'm saying just a week or 2 weeks when you're at a certain stage of DDs and CDs. So I didn't need to track that very same tool you needed for every different part of the process. I mean, I could have, but then it was pointless. So what I did, and I'm kind of fine tuning right now, it's just like different tabs for different pieces. So instead of having architecture and stuff, we do have internal tools for different chunks of the process, which are more handy to have. Not everything has a button in Revit, and not everything you can achieve by shortcut. So this one's good. And again, just like connecting words together, like if you take a closer look on what's circled in yellow, there's an ADA wiki and there's a plumbing calculation wiki, and that takes you to our Notion wiki. Where you can get the basics when you get like at your fingertips, like what you need to check on doors and stuff. So it's not super deep into Revit. It's not super deep. It's just about connecting all the information and making it accessible and making it unique. There's no versions. There's no files scattered all over. Just a connection between every single part of the process, and making sure the source is it's common for everybody, and the path is common for everybody. Cool. So I think I'm right on time for the 15 minutes, which was a great challenge to stay short and snappy. It's fascinating to see how many people are drawn to this initiative. And really look forward to see you all again and keep the conversation going.
Definitely. Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you. I know there's a lot of takeaways that I'm going to be looking at. It's great to connect everybody through information, and I really appreciate you showing us one example of how to do that. And with that, I also would like to transition to our next speaker. So as I mentioned, we'll hold questions till the end, but we'll get to have some questions back for Mercedes at the end of the presentation. So Dana will be talking to us a little bit more about Dynamo and how you can improve your Dynamo Player experience with inputs and outputs.
And thank you, Your Desk, for hosting this, as well as including me in this incredibly amazing panel of women. So my name is Dana Filippi, as Lisa Marie mentioned. I do have a few different channels that you can find me at. I know my last name is kind of confusing to spell, but I do have a new YouTube channel, Dynamo BIM, as Lisa Marie mentioned. Totally a little pun there. Hopefully you get it. I am based out of the Washington, D.C. office. I've been technologist and associate for Smithgroup. So without further ado, today I really want to talk about ways that we can improve the interface of the Dynamo within our Revit users across the globe, right? How can everybody within Revit utilize Dynamo? So there's just a few things that I'm going to go in terms of how we can customize our scripts so that it's a little bit more functional within Dynamo Player. Of course, shout out to data shapes. Okay, I'm not going to show out data shapes today, but I will say data shapes is amazing. Download that package. So That being said, I'm going to show a little quick GIF here of the two scripts I'm going to kind of go over. The first one is basically applying an annotation crop toggle to views. So you can see here it has a true or false toggle that basically allows you to set that crop for your views or not. The next one here is actually for changing case. And you can see here that this will work for any category of elements, any parameter, and any case. It also displays in a watch node what the change of case has been. So you can kind of see there, the Dynamo Player interface is really customized so that the user hopefully never has to get into Dynamo and hopefully isn't scared to get into Dynamo. So let's talk about a few ways that I created, get this guy out of the way here, these kinds of workflows. So the first thing, tip 1, use Booleans, right? Our true false values when we want to be able to apply a crop toggle. Now, as we know, may not know, the annotation crop toggle parameter is a Boolean. So this works perfectly, right? However, sometimes we want to provide a list, right? Do you want to work with rooms? Do you want to work with areas? So we can actually use a true or false or a Boolean with an if conditional statement. So that essentially when that user toggles to true or false, the if conditional statement will then do all the work for you. So you're not having to provide two separate scripts, one for areas, one for rooms. This customizes it just down to one. Tip 2, provide with multiple options. Maybe you don't want just rooms or areas. Maybe you need lowercase, title case, and uppercase, right? A Boolean wouldn't work there. So what I'm doing here, you can see, is I'm actually creating a list, and based off of an integer toggle, you can actually see that the get item at index is doing the work for me. So that node there is actually grabbing the list based off of the case the user specifies. So I don't have to, once again, have a script for lowercase, a script for title case, and you get it. Tip 3. Unfortunately, you guys may have noticed when you try to create an input, you update the title of that node for the Dynamo Player interface, right? So that's actually what the user is going to see within Dynamo Player. However, you can't actually put in line breaks for enters. That just ends the editing of the node name. So little tip here, what you can do is if you add the breaks within the group name, you copy that and paste it into the node name. A little hack there. Maybe Autodesk will catch up to us. We'll be able to put line breaks in there, but you can see now within my input within Dynamo Player, it's very clean. The user knows 0, 1, 2, what are those going to do? Notice also that I have customized the range in there so that it only goes up to 2. Okay, so it doesn't go up to 100, so they're having to use like the tiniest little nudge of that little toggle, right? So once again, making it fully functional so that the user is like, oh my gosh, that was so easy. I want to run a Dynamo Player script again. It was not hard. I am not daunted. One little tip that is also kind of an inadequacy, if you will, within Dynamo Player is if you're the reason that is because this is actually based off of a list of an enumeration. In different versions of Revit, there's a different amount of categories, right? In 2019, there wasn't a path of travel category, for example. So in 2021, views is fine in the category dropdown. But if I open up that same script in 2019, it doesn't exist. It's too far down the list. So that script within Dynamo Player will not work within 2019. Therefore, hardwire it, use the category by name, you're good to go. Tip 5, watch nodes. Especially when we have warnings within our Dynamo scripts, right? Sometimes that's a really daunting thing when someone uses a Dynamo Player script and it runs completed with warnings. And they're like, well, it must have broken. Something didn't run right, right? Well, if they can actually see what that Dynamo script did within the watch node, then they can say, okay, well, there's a warning, but it did what I intended it to do, right? Now, of course, I really try to get those warnings out of there, but sometimes it's just impossible, right? Sometimes there's null values that you can't anticipate, etc. The last tip that I have, and depending on time, I might run into a live demo and test my presentation skills here, but you can see that if there is an error, maybe what we can do is actually provide a watch node as to why the script didn't run. I don't know about you guys. I'm a BIM technologist at Smithgroup. People contact me when Dynamo doesn't work. And so if I can actually tell them why the script didn't work, that cuts down on the amount of communication I'm getting, right? This tells them specifically what they need to do. So how am I on time, guys? Do I have 2 minutes? Okay, awesome. So let me switch out my presentation to Revit here. And once again, we love live demos in presentations here. Yep. Alrighty, so we should be seeing the good old sample file, right? We know all of very familiar with this guy. So essentially, the script that I just demonstrated with that watch node, what's going to happen is it's actually going to place some families based off of an Excel file. Okay, so I have some rooms down here. And so maybe your client gave you an Excel file. They want you to place the families in the specified room based off the existing conditions, whatever, right? You have an Excel file with some family content. You want it to be created through Dynamo. All right, so I have this family placer. So I'm going to click on the edit inputs, right, which is always what I tell my users. First thing you should always do within a Dynamo script. Let's see what inputs you have. So you'll see in here, I'm going to specify first the sheet name. That way, if you have multiple sheets with different content, you can kind of navigate between the different sheets there. The file, pretty straightforward. Just go ahead and run that. Of course, in the background, it's going to open up my Excel file, and it's going to tell me, I don't have a room number 1108. So I need to verify some things. So if I pull over my Excel file over here, you'll see I have some desks that got placed. You can see nothing happened. The Dynamo script actually failed. And the reason this is because actually if you're placing 600 families, sometimes really hard to track which families didn't get created. So in this case, and it takes a really long time to run that script too, right? It's going to take 5 minutes or so to run that script to place 600 families. So in this case, it just fails completely. I can come into my Excel spreadsheet and I can say, oh, typo, delete that one out, save that guy, close it out because Dynamo needs to read it. I'll rerun that. And we'll see if I go to my furniture plan, of course, wherever that guy is. There you go. It has placed my desks and it has told me not only the room numbers which those families got placed in, but the families that got placed in addition. So if I look at this script, it's actually kind of a lengthy thing and I will share it because I'm a nice person. But it essentially just goes through a whole bunch of statements, right? What's happening? Why is it null? What didn't you find in Excel? What didn't you find in Revit? Concatenate those values together, push those out to a watch node, right? So what's actually happening in terms of the beef of the script isn't very complicated. It's really the processing of getting this reporting to come up. Why didn't it work? Or what rooms actually did get furniture or whatever types of elements. And we're waiting on Dynamo per usual, right? This is where I like to have my elevator music. So you can see here, everything in gray is actually the reporting specifically for that room data information, right? So you can see here the beef of the script isn't really actually that much. But if we look here, you can see it's just running some basic, is it null, filter it if it's null, you know, running some Python scripts to get if values conditional statements to get some better list formatting because Dynamo doesn't do that very well sometimes. And then, you know, if it is, then tell me what it is with that room number, right? And then shoot that out to the watch node. So it's a little bit complicated in terms of the actual reporting, in terms of the combination of nodes, but I'm sure most of you guys could do this completely. I'll share it so you guys can take a look and see, in addition to the Excel file, so you guys can take a look. But that's really all I have. I don't know how I am on time. Maybe I could take questions if we have any, or jump on to the next presentation.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that, and also for sharing the Dynamo script so everybody can take a look. I know sharing more input and output, or mostly output information especially, is on my list of things that I need to be better about doing when writing scripts. I'm looking through the chat and I don't see any immediate questions that have popped up, so we'll let people think about that and come with their questions after our last presentation. Definitely lots of thumbs up though. People are liking tip number 3 and tip number 4 as well.
Awesome.
But they're all excellent. So with that, I would like to reintroduce Caris. So Caris will be speaking with us about how you can optimize your VR experiences with Unity 3D.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Can you guys hear me okay? No. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Lisa Marie, Timon, for this opportunity. I really appreciate being on this panel with you guys. Really appreciate learning from you as well. So I'm a virtual reality professional. I work on virtual reality in the AEC space. And some of you might be saying like, oh, okay, I didn't know we were using that as a tool for architectural engineering and construction. It's just as simple as imagine how beneficial and how valuable it would be for the client to be able to see the building before it's built. And that's all it is. As soon as you see it from that perspective, it's like, that makes sense, of course. In fact, architectural visualization has been around for so long and so valuable. And then we just take it to the next level with literally wrapping your head around the project and getting to understand it in the way where you're actually standing in one-to-one scale with the project that you're working on. So here at Walter P. Moore, we actually work on it a little bit beyond just the visualization elements, and we interact with the product. And we use Unity 3D to create our interaction tools. So that I'm going to share with you today, if you want to work on your own virtual reality product and maybe you want to bring value to your firm, these are some of the things that you can do to get the most value out of the platform that we use, which, is Unity. So I want to address one of the elephants in the room, right? Unity versus Unreal. And I'm going to say this just because that's one of the questions that is probably going to come up at the end of this session, right? So I just want to talk about it really quickly. One of the things that I think Unreal is known for is coming to bat with all the polish elements. And that's because if you start a new project in Unreal, you're going to get the post-processing, you're going to get the motion blur, you're going to get the bloom and the lighting effects that make it look so beautiful. But when you press new project in Unity, it looks a little bare bones. And that's because it is. So I'm going to show you how powerful Unity can be, and I'm going to show you what some of the things that you could do to lift up your project so it can look comparable to one in Unreal. So here we go. First things first, I'm going to talk to you about why is frame rate important. Now, we work on a lot of different projects, and we work with a wide variety of people with different levels of experience with virtual reality. So you might have a client who plays Beat Saber on the weekend, and you might have a client who's literally never heard of it. So if we are having those two people in the same room, it's important that both of those people have the best experience as far as not experiencing simulation sickness. While one person may not get the simulation sickness just because of their familiarity with being in virtual reality, and the other person is more apt to experience it because of the, literally being a fish out of water, so to speak. The person who is more accustomed to virtual reality will still experience a level of discomfort if the frame rate isn't where it needs to be. So we need to make sure that there's no bounce back. When we talk about from a user experience perspective, if their first experience is negative, they will not come back to the product, and we don't want that from a customer service perspective. So what are we talking about? We need to be sitting in between 60 and 90, and obviously above that is preferred. But anything below 60 is unacceptable for a public-facing build or anything. We need to have a smooth experience. So one of the reasons why we even experience some of these frame rate issues is because we're having the processing stutter the visuals that are coming through. We're literally receiving some people would call it lag, but it's just the frame rate stuttering because of the processing power. It's too intense for it to keep up. So we need to be kinder to our graphics card, and we need to give it less to think about. Some of the ways that we can do that is by optimizing the geometry that we give it. Now, in the AEC industry, we are very accustomed to very enormous projects, quite literally cities and skyscrapers and entertainment parks and things that are enormous. So of course the files associated are going to be enormous. So one of the ways that we have been addressing the issue of frame rate in virtual reality is by looking at the geometry first and addressing that as an issue. So one of the ways we do that is by reducing the poly count. And because of the nature of some of our use cases, like for instance, yes, we do have client-facing builds that we do, but for the most part, when we use these builds internally, we're using them for our engineers. We're using them internally. We're using them periodically throughout the process for design review, for communication and collaboration within the firm. So we're prioritizing speed over beauty. And that's something that's hard for me as an artist to kind of wrestle with, but you get used to it. So that means that the silhouette of something, while it's important, it is not the most important part. The most important part is being able to view it, because I know that we might have a mixed environment of AEC professionals and maybe some people who are interested in VR, maybe some VR professionals or other real-time gaming professionals. So one of the things that I like to point out is that when you are in AEC, you're rendering everything and it takes a long time. And when you're in virtual reality, everything is updating on every tick, right? So you get a render every single frame. So when you're rendering that many times, sometimes it takes a while to render. So we want to be able to render it immediately. So lowering the poly count, for this example specifically, we're able to reduce it down to almost 1,000 polygons from almost 7,000 polygons just by reducing the topology on the interior of this element rather than sacrificing the integrity of the exterior or the silhouette. We also need to keep a close eye on our cylindrical shapes and our curved surfaces. So this is something that is problematic with some of the off-the-shelf products that I've seen. And one of the things in particular is that they're not handling the topology and the meshing of the curved surfaces and the cylinders in the way that I would you would think that they would be. So just by taking triangles from the top to the bottom of a cylinder, you can reduce the poly count significantly, as you can see in this example. And we're able to do this through a number of different methods that we can get into at another time. So another element of this is batches or draw calls. If you guys aren't familiar, I'll go over it quickly. A batch or a draw call is how many things the processor is rendering at a time. If you are able to reduce the total number of batches, you're going to be increasing the frame rate. It's one of the things that we focus on the most. So in this example, we took the same object that had 2.5 million triangles. We did not reduce the triangle count, but we did in the second example on the right, we combined those objects into 38 groups rather than each having individual pieces. And we were able to get the frame rate from 18 to 126. So it's very, very important to focus on batches and draw calls. And so moving forward, let's talk about how we can improve the number of batches and draw calls other than just combining meshes, right? We can turn all of our meshes to static. Now, luckily, this isn't really the case if you're working on a game. Luckily, in the AEC industry, our buildings aren't going to be moving. Ideally, there are some edge cases there where your building might be moving, but I'm not aware of it at the moment. So it's important to be able to set it to static so that the computer knows that it will not be expecting to have it update or be dynamic at any point. Combining meshes. Combining meshes is what we just referred to, but let's get into it a little bit more, right? We are able to reduce this object from 8,000 triangles to 3,000 triangles. So even the act of combining reduces the poly count. It's just generally beneficial. When we are combining the meshes, we are turning them from multiple draw calls into one singular draw call. And when you're working in a project with hundreds and thousands and into the six figures of elements, it's very important to make sure that you're taking care of these little pieces, even if it's just a toilet. It's when you get into Visual Studio, we use C# in our projects. It's important to be removing empty update loops. Even though it's just a really small thing, we have to get into the nitty-gritty and make sure we are running as optimally as possible. So even just having an empty update loop in one of our scripts, if we have this empty update loop in multiples of our scripts, then that's going to be an extra tick that is running and running on every tick that we do not need. So if we remove that entirely, it will improve the frame rate overall. And on that note, I don't think I have this as a slide, but it's also beneficial to be moving things instead of on update to on awake. So it's only running once if it's applicable for the method that you're working with. In most of the cases, our tools, moving them into awake is beneficial. So additional considerations for optimization. Didn't have any visuals for these things, so just let me talk at you for a second. If you're able to replace any of your Git component calls with direct references, that's going to improve your frame rate. So what that means, instead of having to go and fetch the component that you are needing for that method, instead you are creating a direct reference. I don't know how else to say that. The procedural skybox that's in Unity, the one that you're probably familiar with, just to disable that entirely, and any of the lighting associated with that skybox. There's some other things with the lighting. For instance, I'll just go ahead and touch on it. If you change all of your lights and emissive shaders to baked, that would be preferable. In our particular case, we have a dynamic light, and that is not ideal. But if you had a situation where your light does not move, you could set all of your lights and emissive shaders to baked, and that would improve your frame rate. And just really quickly, disabling shadow mapping. It's just one button press. Static and dynamic, static as well as dynamic batching. Disabling global illumination, again, just one checkbox. And increasing your overall light map to 4096 is going to make everything easier on your computer. So let's talk about fun stuff. I don't have too many images for you, which is probably the exciting part, but I'll be able to expand more on it at a later point. Some of the post-processing effects that Unity has available for you, the sky and fog volume, the literal post-process volume is what it's called, and adding additional reflection probes, which can be automated and added throughout the scene in order to create a ton of beautiful reflections across, as well as, like I mentioned, the motion blur effect. All of these things will give you that beauty element that that you might need in your project without sacrificing your frame rate. So guys for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing those. And I forgot to mention, but we actually have you scheduled back already because obviously VR is a huge topic. So if you are out there interested in VR and learning more, check out Caris's full 30-minute session coming up on your desk. So that will be deep dive into way more info, which we're definitely looking forward to. We did actually have one question come in related to VR. So the question is, what effort does it take to combine meshes for projects that have a lot of these elements?
So we actually wrote our own combined mesh script. I wasn't sure how much of that I could disclose.
Right.
So it is quite a bit of a lift. However, you would be able to do the same sort of method outside of a Visual Studio or in C#. You could do it in the 3D software itself, like a Maya or 3ds Max, and it is quite a lift. Sometimes you just have to let it run over a long period of time, but if you do it in small batches, it does take less time. And so it's a considerable thing you have to plan for. You can do it in a 3D software. I don't know how much I can disclose about our methods that we use.
Not a problem. No, I think that makes sense. And I think that helps elaborate on that a little bit. I'm just going back to the chat. I don't see any other questions at the moment. So if you have other questions, please do post those in the chat. One question that came to mind, staying on the VR topic, is do you generally use, like, I guess, what kind of models do you usually use to take into VR? Is it like always BIM models or SketchUp? Like, are they created in one of the other 3D modeling software specifically for VR? What kind of is that process?
Yeah, absolutely. We use Revit at Walter P. Moore, but we also use a suite of other tools, depending on the project, like Tekla, like Rhino, like Navisworks, and all of these things. It's project dependent. We receive files from other vendors, and so we can't often anticipate which ones. So we actually have an automated build process, which is basically like an automated system that brings from a Revit plugin all the way to Unity. Once the engineer presses a button in the plugin, the engineer then receives, after a few hours, depending on the size of the project, an email with a fully outfitted, zipped executable file ready for VR. And that means that process requires a Revit file, but we can also do custom builds, or we can export something and then import our own. So we can accept, because it's based off of file extension. We can accept FBX and OBJs and Tekla files and Rhino, anything really, awesome. As long as it's a 3D file. That almost never are we responsible for creating the models in the 3D software. It is coming directly from the engineers, and all of the work that's brought into Unity is accurate from the engineers, and it's their true work. Awesome. Which is something I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I think switching gears, we did have another question for you, Dana, and this is about, well, I'll just read it so that I'm not getting the wrong question over to you. So the question is, did you use lists to execute parts of a script and they're asking for clarification on, is that effectively sending a function through a list? And can you kind of expand on that process?
Sorry about that. I think what you're asking there, and I see that question, is when like the script fails and it doesn't do anything, essentially what I'm doing is if I'm getting any reporting values of not found rooms, it's actually feeding it to a conditional statement, an if statement. And then if it's met, it will feed through the proper data. If it's not, it will feed an empty list. So it will just do nothing. So it's not necessarily a function. It's actually just, once again, that conditional statement fed into, how it's actually retrieving the data and processing that data. I think that's what you're asking.
That makes sense to me, but maybe if we did answer the question, let us know in the chat, but hopefully we touched on that. I wanted to give it a second just in case there's any additional questions coming up. I don't see anything. Are there any last thoughts? Anything that our speakers wanted to add today's presentation? I learned a ton today. I love that we were able to talk about 3 such vastly different topics in one day and have all of your expertise on this show. So I definitely want to thank you for your time today and letting us in on a little bit of the different areas that you're working on right now. So thank you very much for that.